This is Group OLP 10, consisting of Leon Martino Delia, Andrei Moravsky, and Samer Hourani. Today we will be talking about the economy in the network society, written by Jan van Dijk.
First of all, we would like to discuss the causes of the current communication revolution. In the 60s and 70s, in the West, people experienced a huge increase in the field of telecommunication. The data show that at that time we observed a 10% growth in the telephone line industry. In the 80s and 90s, the ordinary telephone market was already saturated. However, the mobile phone industry was still growing. In addition, in the late 90s, the development of data communication was even more surprising. More importantly, at that point we also observed the increase in mass communication.
So now, let's have a quick look at some general aspects. Here are the four most important factors why people needed more and more communication media. These are scale extension in production process, division of labor and organizational complexity, growing living standards, and information production.
Now we would like to discuss the communication revolutions. Between 19th and 20th century there was a period of so-called control crisis. This term describes a period in which the organizational and communication means of control lag behind the size, speed, and complexity of physical production, energy extraction, and transportation. The crisis was solved by control revolution. As a result of this control revolution, we experienced the first communication revolution, where the rapid development of photography, telephones, press, film, radio, and television was observed. However, right now we are in a period of second control crisis where the media networks seem to be the only solution.
So how big is the importance of new media networks? Well, it is the solution of growing problems in the fields of mass research and marketing. Media networks have several advantages, namely, it provides support for the flexibility, efficiency, and productivity of organization. It improves logistic processes, and finally, it helps to reach new consumers. The next part of our presentation will focus on a flow economy. In the past, companies had centralized the production as much as they could. After the Second World War, they decided to decentralize the production. However, they also decided to centralize the capital and the strategic control over production processes. This resulted in the creation of monopolization and oligopolization. From now on, big tycoons were able to control the media. As a result of decentralization, there are several more or less independent companies instead of one fully centralized organization. So you have regional departments where the activities are spread across a certain area. Here are some motives of decentralization: rationalization and distribution of added value. Now, companies are able to have greater control over the production and their organization. Thanks to the decentralization, corporations are able to solve problems like cost of establishment, traffic congestion, and any kind of transportation problems. But there is still a growing need for communication. And because public networks are not sufficient for companies, they decided to create their own communication network. Below are presented some advantages of these networks: the ability to have well-trained staff, to produce at lower costs, to make use of a well-developed infrastructure, to allocate the information in high-tech centers, and finally, to place the management next to financial centers. In order to connect all of these aspects, companies needed more advanced communication networks. In order to improve the efficiency, companies needed to reorganize the labor process. They needed to switch from just-in-case to just-in-time, from mass production to specialized production, and finally from for-this to post-for-this, which means large-scale production. And because the production became more complex and the distance between companies increased, they needed more media networks, and the solution was the computer integrated manufacturing, which connects all divisions of the organization. In order to give you a better understanding of how it works, we provided an illustration of such a structure.
Although companies lowered product costs, office costs were still increasing. The reason for that is that office work was informal, unstructured, and not mechanized enough. Therefore, organizations needed more streamlined office, which works as an information processing system. Here, the data is generated, produced, collected, processed, multiplied, distributed, stored, retrieved, and interpreted, and the tasks are divided.
For companies, information and communication flow became more important than flow of physical products. Therefore, knowledge networks have been introduced. These are the ICT networks designed for the creation, accumulation, distribution, exchange, and use of knowledge, and they consist of people who use both social and media networks to create, exchange, and apply all kinds of knowledge. In addition, ICT help to simplify the digitalization of knowledge and knowledge management.
In general, there are four concepts of organization. The first three
are traditional organizations and can work without ICT. In the virtual organization, ICT plays a decisive role. Therefore, it is not possible to have a virtual organization without ICT. There is an ideal concept of virtual organization where people work together via the internet, they don't know each other, and the goal is to reach global markets. However, teleworking is only possible if it's added to traditional organization.
Do ICT networks help to create a new form of economic organization? In 1990, Walter Powell published a well-known article, Neither Market Nor Hierarchy, Network Forms of Organization. He compares three forms of contemporary economic organization: markets, hierarchies, and networks. These three forms are ideal types. Real economies are combinations of these three forms. According to Van Dijk, these forms also characterize whole economies from the organizational point of view. The communist, or so-called command economy, is dominated by hierarchies, and the free market economy is dominated by markets. In the so-called mixed economy, networks achieve special importance. However, this simplification requires several qualifications. In this slide, you can see Van Dijk's adaptation of Powell's typology. He talks about the forms of economic organizations, from markets, networks to hierarchies, and their characteristics, based from organizational basis to relation of actors to conflict resolution and flexibility. Now, since it's a lot to talk about, we're going to skip this part and we're going to move on. Does this combination of organizational forms lead to an altogether new economy? Is the flow economy also a new economy? New economy expresses several meanings. It indicates the transformation of other businesses, the old economy, into corporations increasingly using computer technology and online communications. Finally, it means an economy working in a completely different way to the old economy. Strong claims. Strong claim is the statement that this economy causes a permanent rise of labor productivity and economic growth without recession or high unemployment and high inflation. The assumption is that this economy will push aside the old economy in a short period of time. It is argued that the strong claim has to be rejected and that the weak claim might be justified. What is the weak claim? Weak claim is that the new economy temporarily increases economic growth and that it launches a wave of innovations that first make the processes in our economy faster and more efficient, flow economy, and afterwards perhaps cause a breakthrough of new products. According to this claim, the economy keeps working according to the old rules of capitalism. This means periods of downturns in economic growth, rising unemployment, recessions, and inflation. ICT and productivity. For a long time it wasn't clear whether ICT affected productivity and economic growth at all. This phenomenon is known as the productivity paradox of ICT. Considerable investments in ICT are made, but the returns are not clearly perceptible or measurable. According to the EU Economy Review of 2003, ICT accounted for about 60% of US labor productivity growth over the second half of the 1990s. However, it appears that the ICT manufacturing industries revealed the highest productivity growth rates between 1996 and 2000, followed by ICT service industries, and the service industries intensively using ICT. Therefore, the biggest contribution to productivity growth comes from the ICT industry itself, which produces increasingly powerful hardware and software for declining prices. These reasons are causing a steep increase in ICT investment. Characteristics of the new economy. The new economy has 5 main characteristics. Number 1. Products of the information economy are characterized by high development costs and low reproduction costs. Number 2. Information is an experience good. Number 3. Information is a special good or product because the producer is able to sell and transfer the good to a purchaser without losing it himself. Number 4. Networks create information systems, combining devices, connections, and information flows inside. And last, number 5, existence of network effects, also called network externalities. A network becomes both less expensive and more effective when more units or people are connected. The more people have access to the internet and email, the more valuable these media become for those connected. At a particular time, a new medium reaches the stage of so-called critical mass. From that moment onwards, the medium seems to diffuse as a matter of course until all potential users are connected. However, according to Shapiro and Varian, 1999, these 5 characteristics are not new. The old economy also makes information products, experience goods, and network systems. Only 2 characteristics of the network economy can really be called new: the reversal of the value chain and the division and dematerialization of the value chain. Number 1. The reversal of the value chain. This is a process running from production via distribution and marketing to consumption. Consumers give the first signals and producers deliver on demand. Number 2. Division and dematerialization of the value chain. As many traders in e-commerce have learned the hard way, they are extremely dependent on the fast and reliable supply of their products to keep their customers satisfied and to guarantee their success. An important consequence of this division and dematerialization is the partial disappearance of traditional distributive trade to be replaced by all kinds of information brokers. The result is an increasing shift in the economy from material to informational goods. Theory of long waves of the economic development. According to this theory, the economy not only reveals short trade cycles between 5 and 7 years long, but also long waves of about 50 years with an upturn and downturn phase that are mainly launched by the arrival of new technologies. In the last 2 centuries, we've witnessed 4 waves dominated by the steam engine, 1850, electricity and the media of the first communication revolution, 1850 to 1900, oil, steel, chemicals and the combustion engine, 1900 to 1950, and electronically controlled machines, followed by the transistor and the computer, 1950 to 2000. All these technologies had a great and lasting impact on production, transport and communications. However, not until decades after their first application did they appear to have a clear influence on economic growth and labor productivity. Apparently, technology has to be incorporated and domesticated in the organizations and households before it has a greater impact.
Now we are moving to another section, which is the producers, from infrastructure to service providers. In this section, we are going to discuss how the communication branch of the economy takes advantages of the technological and economic developments. Since activities in this sector are extremely divergent, it's important to make a clear distinction between parties engaged in networks. These parties are manufacturers of infrastructure, carriers and managers of public and private networks, service providers, and consumers of networks. Before we start talking about the parties, we're going to see a figure which is very important to understand what's going on in media sector and also to make a distinction between vertical column of various networks like telephone, computer and broadcasting, and the horizontal layer of the functions that are performed by them. Now we are going to talk about the first party engaged in networks, which is manufacturers of infrastructure, which is nowadays the highest turnover of capital that takes place at the level of material infrastructure. The total turnovers in tele, data and mass communication equipments worldwide is around $100 billion a year. This amount of money is very huge, but we won't be wondering if we know that the sales of cables, switches and the transmitters booming every time a new network is constructed. For some decades now, a strong horizontal concentration, they concentrate more on the same level of the production chain. For example, telephone company or telephone networks, they make some telephone equipment, and the cable network, they just sell and make some cables and switch boxes and so on and so on. And the world market for telecommunication and computer network equipment, it's really controlled by 10 companies, and some of them are Alcatel and Siemens, Nixdorf and Cisco. But nowadays it started some mergers, and they expect only 5 and 6 multinational giants will remain after these mergers. Public network operators and carriers originally created a natural monopoly of a great social significance, but later on, due the tough international competitions, there was a need for private operators, and it has been shifted from monopolies to oligopolies. And we are moving now to the service providers. Network services are divided into 4 categories. First category is tele and data communication services, and that could be, for example, an operating system for computer, such as Windows or Linux, and it can be also browsers for internet like Internet Explorer. The second category, it is transaction services, and that could be sending money online, or it can be also payment online, or reservation, or making and commercial online through the internet. Third category is communication services, which it offer you that you can exchange text or images or maybe like making a call, and that we can see it in most of the social media nowadays. And the last category is information services. It offers you information that you are looking for, and the best example is the search engines like Google search engine, but also it can be online library in a university. Consumers, pushers or pulled. First of all, we are going to talk about governments and corporations, the owner and the hires of private networks and the participants in special public networks. They were mostly found among the government or quasi-government bodies, and that explains in the decades ago the largest and the most advanced network were constructed for military applications and also for space travels. But then later on they were the pioneer of the introduction of the networks in financial sector, and then transnational corporations, followed by data banks, applications in production and distribution. Households and individuals. In the 1980s and early of the 1990s, the demand for computer networks such as software and hardware and services started by individuals and households after it starts from the small companies, but later on the market has a failure because they supply new media that it's not being demanded by anyone, such as a video phone and video disc and video text, and maybe nobody hear about those, and that was the reason for the mismatch of design and demand.